Clash of the Classics.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Clash of the Classics. Great to have you guys along. I'm Donnie. I'm here with my partner Chris. Say hello, Chris.
Hello, Chris.
It's great to have you guys here. If you're new to the show, perhaps you've just discovered us. Maybe this is your first time. We welcome you here. It's great to have you along with us. You're going to find every week we roll the clock backwards. We pit two classic models against one another. Although today we're going to do it just a little different. We're going to chop it up just a little bit today, Chris. Rather than pitting two classic models against one another, we're going to showcase one classic model. And the reason why we're going to do that is because we're going to be showcasing the DeLorean, the DMC 12. And I have quite a history with that company, and we'll talk more about that. Now, I actually worked for DeLorean, and that was a heck of a time in my life. But typically, we'll go head-to-head with styling. We look at powertrain stuff. We talk about design features. We're going to talk a lot about design features today. And then we vote on the car that we like best. Today, we're gonna have a two-way tie.
I picked the DeLorean.
We're gonna both vote on the DeLorean, and as far as that goes, it's the only car you will be able to vote on. But we always want, and we always invite you folks to go on either our Facebook page or even go to our website, horsepoweronline.com, or here on our YouTube channel. Let us know how you think about or what you think about these cars, and if you have a suggestion, that's always, I always forget to mention that. If you have a suggestion for a car that you'd like us to showcase here on the show, then by all means, let us know. Any car you like, we'll go ahead and we'll put it into our schedule and we'll talk about it. It's always a fun time. These battles are fueled by the Automatic Transmission Rebuilders Association. The ATRA is the largest automatic transmission network in the world. You can find them anytime at atra.com. All right, let's get started with this now. This is going to be fun. Looked at this a couple of weeks ago, or I guess it was last week on our schedule, and it was all about the DeLorean. And I, for one, was pretty excited that that was the car coming up. Now, as you know, you've known me for quite a few years. I worked for DeLorean. I happened to, it was just a stumble upon job. I was working at a transmission shop, and I found an ad in the paper that they were looking for some help in the QA Center, or the Quality Assurance Center, over at 2055 Southeast Main Street in Santa Ana back in 1981. And I thought, DeLorean, I had no idea what the heck a DeLorean, no one did for that matter. And I thought, well, I could always use a few extra bucks. That would come in handy. So I responded to the ad. The job was great. It was from 6 in the evening until 10 at night, which was perfect for my schedule. And I thought, I could do this. Well, when I walked over to I drove over and I walked into the building, and I met with, at the time, the director of Western Operations, and I met with his assistant, Joe Black. And I said, can I see this car that we're going to be, QAing? And they said, sure. So they took me out in the back where first time I saw it, Chris, I thought, you know what? Wow, this thing is as unique a car as I had ever seen. I'd never driven it at that point, but I remember how I felt. That was, 30 whatever years ago, or 81 till today, so it's 40 years ago.
Coming up on 40 years.
Getting close to 40 years ago. And I remember how I felt at that time. I still feel it today. It was so visceral for me when I can still remember the warehouse door swinging open, and I thought, wow. Now, here's a car, I instantly fell in love with it.
It's interesting that the legacy that it has preserved for, like we said, coming up on 40 years, that for a car that pretty much was only run a couple of years, we're still talking about it.
And not only it's been in the movie Back to the Future, which you'll tell us a little bit about in a moment, but yeah, it really has. And then also the unfortunate situation that surrounded the founder of the company, John DeLorean, who I had an opportunity to meet him on 3 different occasions, and I don't know any of the legal stuff that happened with him. I'll never know the truth from fiction, but I just know that when I met the man, he was very kind, very respectful, booming presence. I mean, the guy was like 6'4", 6'5", but just a very booming, but at the same time, very kind, very personable guy. First time he met me, second time he met me, he remembered my name, called me by my name, Donnie, great to see you. And I thought, wow, there's a guy who's the president of Pontiac, introducing himself to me. It was a real fun experience. The time that I spent at the DeLorean headquarters was great, but how it kind of worked for me is I went from the QA center to the main Southern California headquarters, because it just so happened that there was a manifest boatload of vehicles that had automatic transmissions that were brought over. And they were built in Ireland. And at the time, the Irish government was begging for business to be started there so they could improve their economy, which, kudos to them. Well, most of, or at least you should say many of the assembly line workers in those days had not had jobs for generations. They were farmers and they were shepherds and those types of things. And so they finally found themselves, coming up into, real-time world stuff, whereas 1981 at the time. And they got their first positions on the assembly line. Well, with an automatic transmission, many of our listeners will know, if the engine is not running and you fill the trans up, you'll get a full reading on the stick. But as soon as you start the engine, the torque converter draws it all up, and then your transmission's low.
Yeah.
Well, that's what happened. They had filled the transmissions up, but didn't realize they had to start the car, or someone forgot. I don't know how exactly it came to pass, but it ended up they were 2.5 quarts low on fluid. By the time the transport driver got the car onto the boat dock, then off the boat,
Smoked it.
then onto the transport truck, and you know what happened, right? Wouldn't barely move forward.
Oh, yeah.
And I had no idea what transmission was in it. There wasn't any service manual at the time. There were any sort of literature at all. It was still in the very early stages. It hadn't even been sent to the dealerships yet. And my superior came to me and he said, "Hey, I understand that your real job during the daytime is automatic transmission tech." And I said, "Yes, sir, that's correct." He said, "Do you think that you could take a look at this car?" And I said, "Well, I don't have any objections to it, but do you have any kind of, because I have no idea what's in this car." And he said, "Well, we don't, but can we take it apart and let's see if maybe we can figure this out?" And I said, "Hey, I'm game if you are." So I went in on a Saturday morning. It took me 4 hours to get the transmission out of the vehicle because I'd never done one, and it's the way it's sandwiched in this wishbone frame. It was difficult. Since then, I've come up with easier ways to remove it. But I got the trans out, and many of our transmission listeners will appreciate. After I got the trans out and apart, it was the exact same unit internally as the Chevrolet Chevette, which was a GM Trimatic 180 transmission. And I looked at my supervisor and I said, "Not only can we build this transmission, I can get parts for it today. In fact, I can go right now and get parts. I got a whole overhaul set, clutches, drums, everything, about 4 miles from here. We can buy as much as you like." So, of course, he was elated and we were able to get the car back on the road. But it was that incident or that opportunity that presented itself that got me noticed by the management squad up at the main headquarters. And then, of course, they came and they said, "Hey, we don't have a training tech. We don't have anybody who will train our dealerships if they have a transmission problem. Would you consider it?" And, of course, it took me all of about 30 seconds to make that decision, and off we went, and away we went. And then, in fact, even as we speak this day, I'm the only automatic transmission technician, the only automatic trans tech that DeLorean ever had that was certified with DeLorean. Didn't go anywhere. Unfortunately, it was, it ended up going bad, very badly for Mr. DeLorean. But what a cool car. I mean, back to the car now. I really liked it. A lot of people struggle with it. Had an MSRP of, at the time, this was in 1981, folks, $26,175. In today's dollars, take a guess at what that might be.
It's at least double.
In fact, you're really close. That's about $67,000 in today's money. And that was a ton of change. Interestingly enough, though, there were, and I don't know how many, but there were a lot of people who were lined up who had put down deposits on cars that even had not been produced yet because they, interested or they were anxious to be, kind of like Tesla is right now. Everybody can't wait to get their hands on the Model 3. Same sort of situation. But this car originally slated or was intended to have the Wankel or the rotary engine, much like you find in the Mazda RX-7. That's what originally was going to go in it. But because of some of the design concerns, John DeLorean, that is, ended up going with a Peugeot Volvo Renault Type 2.9-liter V6. It wasn't turbocharged. It was just naturally aspirated. Had either a 5-speed or an automatic 3-speed. But here's the thing. A car that looks so cool, so underpowered at 130 horsepower. You got it, and you think, okay, I am really ready to have a blast in this thing. And then it's like, wow, it was such a letdown. It was so underpowered. Now, if you turbocharge it, obviously that's a whole nother discussion. But straight from the factory, it was terribly underpowered.
Underpowered and overpriced. But it makes you think, as could be a waste of time to think this, but what if it wouldn't have gone under? Do you think they would have added down the line, like, hey, this is our performance version, we're kicking out 300 horsepower, then...
How funny you would say that, because
cool
there was, even back when I was with the company and the company was solvent, there was the DMC van, they had the pickup truck, the sports car, the DMC 12, the gull-wing door, there was the station wagon, there was a whole family of DeLoreans that were being proposed for the market, because John was certain, he was absolutely convinced that this would not only be a hit, but a huge hit.
Well, in some ways, he was correct.
In some ways, he was correct. Well, he needed $175 million to start the company, to kind of develop it. He got the money. He somehow, and I don't know how he did this, but he enticed Sammy Davis Jr. and Johnny Carson, which were a lot of our older folks will know who those people are, to invest in the company, raise the money. But then as time passed, as time does, the money began to deplete. The cash reserves began to deplete. And legend is, allegedly, he turned to trafficking some cocaine in order to make the company work. He was later he was found not guilty, ultimately, and so he never served any time for it. But once the not guilty verdict came through, it was done. It was far too late.
Kind of like the prototype Walter White.
Kind of like the prototype.
I need 737,000.
Yeah. Remember the guy for those Breaking Bad fans out there. That's kind of exactly the way it went. But before going any further, I want to mention today's clash. Today's discussion with DeLorean is made possible by the largest automatic transmission network in the world. They are the Automatic Transmission Rebuilders Association, simply the ATRA. ATRA reminds me to remind you, next time you have a transmission concern, you even think you've got a transmission problem, do not leave it in the hands of someone who's not qualified or certified. Head on over to ATRA.com. There you're going to find thousands of ATRA member transmission service providers coast to coast. Remember, you got a red dot on that driveway, you hear a strange grinding sound, you feel some kind of a strange slip between gears, got to get you over to ATRA.com. Once again, ATRA.com. All right, let's talk some more about this DeLorean. One of the things that is most memorable for me is the design of the doors. And, there were two cars that preceded the DeLorean that influenced it heavily. But the one that was most heavily influential was the 1956 Mercedes with the gull-wing doors. And John was a huge fan of that design, of how that car worked, how it looked. It was far different when it came to the way the doors were mounted and how they were spring-loaded than the Mercedes. But overall, the concept was the same. You had doors that opened up. And a lot of people, I remember back in those days, there were so many miscommunications and misconceptions about the car. But a lot of people, a lot of potential buyers that I spoke to back in the early 80s were hesitant because they felt as though if you got into a parking lot,
that was going to be my question.
You couldn't open the door.
There's that one guy that can't quite make it, and his tire's creeping over, and you got to squeeze out because I don't eat salads every day. It's like, how are you going to open that whole door?
Correct, and that was the general consensus. And unfortunately, the DeLorean sales team did not do a good job of communicating. Well, quite a few things, and that was one of them. But because of where the door was hinged in the center of the car, it required 11 inches to open that door. So now you didn't have to eat a salad. I mean, the door would think of that. 11 inches is not very far. You open a regular car door 11 inches, you're not getting out of it.
No.
So because of where the door, now if the door would have been hinged toward the side of the body, yes, then it would have swung way out. But in this case, it swung up. And it was brilliant in terms of how it was designed. Pininfarina was the design manufacturer that worked with John on it, and I think he did a great job. A lot of people argued with the stainless steel exterior. I know I have a friend here in my hometown that he laughs at me, thinks it's the biggest joke. I kind of think it was, if you're trying to do something different. And remember, here, for us in California, we cannot appreciate what it means to have to worry about rust on your vehicle because we don't live in snow climates.
Well, you got to think about the people who live near the beach, though.
But even and you're correct, and there is that that saltwater rot that happens. But think of the eastern climates where you have rock salt that are just eating cars up. And so, the entire car was essentially rust-proof with the exception of the bolts maybe that held the transmission to the back of the engine. But, I mean, body-wise, structural-wise, the chassis, all of it was rust-proof. And that's kind of the thing that he was trying to push, that, yes, you have a couple of states, maybe a handful here on the West Coast, that don't deal with snow. But the majority of this country deals with snow, and he felt like, hey, I've got an idea here that not only looks cool, that's easy to maintain, it's also unique. I mean, what other car do you know of that's stainless steel?
No, I thought it was cool. If you're going to be trying to, be forward-thinking and design something revolutionary, don't paint it red. Put it stainless steel. That's awesome. And especially, when they were all obsessed with, a lot of the alien, futuristic, cool aerodynamic designs. Of course it's going to be stainless steel. I mean, it caught on with refrigerators.
Exactly. So obviously you and I are on the same page. I think it was an excellent idea. A lot of people argued. A lot of people found fault. A lot of people poked fun. And, if that's something that you don't like, well, that's the nice thing about this country.
There's plenty of other cars out there.
You can like whatever you like, but I thought the car from top to bottom, with the exception of the anemic power that the engine was producing, and could have been so easy to fix it. I mean, so easy to resolve that problem. Just bolt a turbocharger on it, or in this case, bolt 2 on it. Problem solved.
Yeah.
Now we got a runner. But, they chose not to do it. It is what it is. Back in '82, like I say, John was arrested for drug trafficking. It was just too late. I just wish that it could have went on. In 2016, a company in Texas did buy the rights, and now the speculation is that they're going to be producing between 300 and 500 cars a year at an average estimated cost of $100,000. They're going to be, they're going to be powered quite better than the original.
I would hope so.
But they're looking about the same. But there were subtle changes throughout this car from top to bottom throughout the course of the year. One thing that John DeLorean felt was a gimmick, in fact, he would say that, he thought it was gimmicky, was every year a manufacturer shuts down a production design and then redesigns for the next model year. And he felt strongly about that was a joke, that was silly. You don't need to do that. Why can you not just implement subtle changes throughout your production year so that it's constantly evolving ever so mildly, ever so subtly, until you get to a place where you have the best of what it is you're trying to do. And it's one way to look at it. I don't know that I agree or disagree. I'll just say that I understand his point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the gimmicky aspect of it. But clearly it did well for some other companies. I mean, look at what was like a 6-year hiatus for the Camaro. Came back and it just super popularity.
Yeah, do you remember speaking of the Camaro, all of the hype that surrounded that? And you would see cars that were wrapped in some mysterious wrapping, and you had cars that had the car covers with the windshield cut out. So,
yeah, and then they hired Michael Bay to shoot the commercial.
Yeah,
the 2-hour-long commercial that also starred robots. I remember that one.
And now here we are, what is it, 10 years later or whatever, and it's meaningless. One of those things, and we had this conversation on one of our Horsepower for an Hour episodes a few months ago. I don't get that, and a lot of people call me a fuddy-dud. I don't believe in that, we got to add mystery to it. We have to add suspense. If you're going to build it and you already have your clay model done, then just show it. Get somebody hype me up on what it is you have. Don't try to hype me up with a car cover I'm supposed to think, oh my God, I'm so suspensed out. I just can't stand it. I got to know I guess I don't play like that.
Well, maybe it's not for you or for some people, but I'm sure that there's plenty of science behind it. I mean, the people doing advertisements aren't just doing stuff willy-nilly. They're putting in their research. They're showing, okay, most people like the anticipation, because anticipation builds everything.
I guess you've got a good point. It's the same reason why many people choose not to have the ultrasound when they get pregnant, and I'd rather be surprised type thing. See, I'm just the opposite. I want no surprises, because typically, in my experience, they're not good. So I'd rather not be surprised. But that's about all the time we have for this conversation with the DeLorean. If you like the DeLorean, please let us know. And here's the thing. If you don't like it, hey, let us know. Either way, go to our Facebook page or our website, horsepoweronline.com. Check us out here on our YouTube channel. Let us know which part of this car you like, which part you don't like. If you like all of it, maybe none of it. But the 1981, 1982 DeLorean, definitely for me, a memorable experience in my life. I will always treasure and cherish those memories. It was so spontaneous that it just adds to it, because I had no idea that this company would turn out the way it did. But in any event, if you have got a transmission problem, you even think you got a trans concern, as we said in the middle of this show, got to check it out. If you've got a transmission concern, only one place to go for the solution. It's an authorized ATRA member automatic transmission repair facility. ATRA's Golden Rule warranty is the best. I'm talking the most comprehensive warranty program on the planet, and it's available only from participating members of the Automatic Transmission Rebuilders Association. Find them anytime at atra.com. Hey, for Chris, I'm Donnie. For the entire Horsepower for an Hour crew, the entire Clash of the Classics battle crew, we'll see you next week.